Well, we're going to complete our journey, our introductory journey into complex numbers or imaginary land. We're journeying through imaginary land by dividing complex numbers. Now, when we divide complex numbers, we're actually going to be multiplying by the complex conjugate. So let's look. We got negative 2i divided by 3 plus 5i, and this is being represented to us as a fraction, if you will. 2i, negative 2i over 3 plus 5i. And what I mean by multiplying by the conjugate, we're going to multiply this by 3 minus 5i over 3 minus 5i. And this is the complex conjugate, which you might recognize that all we're really doing is changing the sign of this binomial from a positive to a negative. In some cases, it'll be from a negative to a positive, as the case may be. Now, in what is now the denominator, when we multiply by the complex conjugate, we should end up with a real number. In other words, our imaginary number should be canceling out, or we can simplify that because we've got an I squared, which of course is negative 1. Well, let's go ahead and just go through this, and I'm going to do this separately. Let's first start with negative 2i times 3 minus 5i, the numerator portion of this. Well, let's see, we got negative 2i times 3, so that is negative 6i. And then we've got negative 2i times negative 5i. Well, that's going to give us positive 10i squared. But what is I squared? Well, I squared is negative 1, okay? And so 10 times negative 1 is negative 10i. And so I'm going to write it this way. I'm going to say we now have, our numerator now is negative 10 minus 6i. All right, well, let's multiply the denominator by the complex conjugate. And I guess I'll do this. I'm going to do this down here. So we got 3 plus 5i times 3 minus 5i. And you might recognize that what we're going to do here is FOIL this. So let's see. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times negative 5i is negative 15i. Positive 5i times 3 is positive 15i. And positive 5i times negative 5i is negative 25i squared. Well, I can see here that this negative 5i, 15i, and this positive 15i are just going to cancel. And what is I squared? Well, I squared is negative 1. So negative 25 times negative 1 is going to give me positive 25. So we got 9 plus 25 or 34. Okay, now let's put this back into the rational form. So I've got negative 10 minus 6i over 34. Well, let's see, both the 10 and the negative 10 and the negative 6 and the 34, those are all divisible by 2, so I can simplify this a bit. And let's see, when I do, I got negative 5 minus 3i over 17. And I could break that apart, as you'll sometimes see in your answers, where it's negative 5 over 17, break it into its real and imaginary components, minus or negative 3i over 17. All right, well, Shazam. There we go. Let's look at one more, and this time we're going to have complex numbers in both the numerator and the denominator. All right, well, as promised, we've got two complex numbers, one in the numerator and one in the denominator. So we're dividing 2 plus I by 1 minus I. And in order to complete this division process, we're going to multiply by the complex conjugate of the denominator. So we're going to then set this up. This is going to be times 1 plus I over 1 plus I. All right, well, let's work on this numerator first. So we've got 2 plus I times 1 plus I. And we're going to FOIL this. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. And 2 times positive I is plus 2I. And positive I times 1 is just positive I. And let's see, we got positive I times positive I. Well, that's going to be plus I squared. But what is I squared? I squared is negative 1. So let's combine our like terms. Well, let's see, 2 minus 1, since I squared is negative 1, is just going to give me 1. And positive 2I plus I is going to be 3I. Okay, well, that's going to suffice for our numerator. Let's work on our denominator. And so we got 1 minus I times 1 plus I. And remember, when I multiply a number by its complex conjugate, I should not have any imaginary terms left. It should all be real terms. And if I do have any imaginary terms left, I've done something wrong. I better go back and check my work. All right, well, 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times positive I is positive I. And negative I times 1 is negative I. And negative I times positive I is negative I squared. And what's I squared again? Negative 1. So if this is negative 1, then I got a minus negative 1, which is a positive 1. So then 1 plus 1 is 2. And, well, my positive I and my negative I cancel, and so my denominator is going to be 2. So then we got 1 plus 3I over 2. And if we broke this down into its real and its imaginary parts, then we could rewrite this as 1/2 plus 3I over 2. And shazam. Hey, we're dividing complex numbers in imaginary land. Ooh.